Welcome to this week's edition of World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley here in Washington, D.C. We've just had a shudder of panic go through the world speculative derivatives interrelated bubble system. And this also points us towards the realistic qualities, I think, of this prognosis we had a month or so ago about the coming 1935-1936. That is to say, 2014-2015 marked by large-scale mass strike upsurges. We are maintaining a kind of a dual agitational focus this week. One is we're coming up to July 1st. On July 1st, the interest rates on student loans are scheduled to double. And we are going to continue to advocate the Elizabeth Warren Tierney bill. Warren Tierney, the Bank on Students Act, cutting the interest rates on new student loans to 0.75%. We would like to open that up to make all student loans, and I mean all, including private consolidation, Perkins, Stafford, and every other kind, plus all of those should be refinanceable at the new 0.75 rate to begin to stabilize this crushing debt burden. So this is going to come to a head now between now and July 1st. So maintain mobilization on that. We've gotten through the season of the commencements. Didn't exactly get what we want out of that, but all of that effort will, I think, come to fruition later in the summer, certainly by September, when people come back and confront this. They're going to be made aware of it. So the question of the Warren bill. The other thing, of course, is we've got candidates. We're going to have Randy Credico running for mayor of New York City later in the program. We've had Willie Araujo running in New Jersey, also for with Randy Credico. It's mayor of New York, and Willie Araujo, it's governor of New Jersey. But the important thing is that this is a united front on both sides of the Hudson. The Wall Street sales tax must be levied so that the Wall Street fat cats pay their fair share. Now, the other thing is, and this is also raised, of course, in the Warren bill. The Warren bill calls for the student loans to be financed at 0.75% through the Federal Reserve discount window. This week, Helicopter Ben Bernanke, at the center of all attention by his comments that maybe the current hot money program of the Federal Reserve will have to taper off. The tapering issue. Taper on the wall. This is what Bernanke was talking about, and that has led to some real jitters around the world, a 550-point loss over a couple of days in New York, and similar losses, 3, 4, 5, 6% in other places around the world. Let's just get right to the heart of the matter. If you have a depression, we have a world economic depression. Never forget this. This is the beginning of all reality. You don't have business as usual. You cannot implement any program except a recovery program in the midst of a depression. However, the alternatives are these. You can have an immediate deflationary crash of the kind that Andrew Mellon, Ron Paul, and other Austrians have wanted, where you liquidate everything, everything is destroyed, all financial values are destroyed, mass unemployment, and then supposedly you're going to get a recovery, but again, that's cold comfort if you died in the process, as many people would die, an entire human generation crushed, colossal amounts of wealth destroyed in such a process. So you can do that if you want to. If you're a lunatic or if you're a proto-fascist, you can go with the Austrian school. Or you can do the Keynesian consumer-led recovery. This was tried by Pelosi and company in the stimulus, and it does have some positive effect. There's no doubt about it. It does keep things going for a while, but eventually the political will was sapped, and it does not produce a lasting, self-sustaining economic recovery. I'm sorry, it does not. And then we have, in some ways, one of the worst, well, it's not the worst, but it's very bad, which is the hot money approach. And the hot money approach is the $27 trillion line of credit, and then the QE1, QE2, QE3, $85 billion of hot money a month. And all that does is to stoke speculation, because it's not channeled into production, infrastructure, and the things that will lead to a productive recovery and full employment. It only goes towards speculative activity, or in this case, keeping the zombie banks alive. Somehow it's a kind of a life support system for the zombie banks. So what Helicopter Ben talked about this week was tapering off the hot money. And what you see is not even ending the hot money, but even the perspective that the hot money might end someday leads to a big frisson of panic all around the world. And that you see that on the U.S. side, right? It simply means that the entire derivatives universe has been oriented towards essentially free money where they pay you if you calculate in the rate of inflation. And then we've got other things that complicate it. In Japan, we've got the Abe government, Abenomics. Abenomics, simply the old British game, competitive devaluations, right? Print a lot of yen, go for competitive devaluations, try to drive down the value of your currency, and maybe you can get an export-led recovery. That would have been fine 20, 30 years ago. The Japanese economy still maintains a very considerable industrial capability, but the problem is that the Japanese banking system and so forth, their real estate bubble has left the Japanese banks as zombie banks, and it's not possible to use this competitive devaluation thing in an economy so highly financialized, because when you're devaluing the yen, then you're devaluating all these speculative values. So that's Japan. And then China, in a process which I think will have to be investigated a little bit more closely. We've got a liquidity crunch in China. The interbank market in China has supposedly seized up for the moment, and we are getting interest rates of 10, 15, maybe even 25% in interbank lending. And some people say the Chinese government is doing it. It looks to me like it's got to do with the Federal Reserve, some combination of the Federal Reserve and Japan doing it. And then you've got Europe, right, where the result of Bernanke has been, for example, to exacerbate the spread between the Bundesbank, the Bund, right, the German government bond, and the Italian treasury bond. This, it gets up to 270, 280, 300. And then you've got the perspective of Italy blowing up in the way that Greece and Spain and Portugal and Ireland and so forth have. And that then threatens the entire European situation. Now, there is also this other possibility. I mentioned that the worst thing you can do, the absolute worst, is to have an immediate deflationary crash, because that tends to destroy your governing system as well as your economy. And a good example is Chancellor Brüning of Germany from 1930 to 1932. It's the immediate prelude to Hitler. You can make a society ripe for a fascist seizure of power with deflation. Inflation and hyperinflation, no. 1923 did not lead to a Nazi seizure of power, but 1929 to 33 did, especially when exacerbated. So there's our situation. Now, the other side of it, though, is you've got mass strike upsurges in Turkey, in Brazil, in Greece, right? If that scandal around the television brings down the Samaras government, we might have Syriza very soon. And in the United States, we got fast food strikes. So keep your eyes on the mass struggles and how you can contribute to them with program and activism. And that will be our direction here on the program. Back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. This is our edition of June 21st, 2013. It is the first day of summer. Summer is coming in, and here in Washington, D.C., it is a beautiful day. Now, I was in New York City 2 weeks ago now, and I picked up a very, very interesting piece of campaign literature. And this is, I think, a document of tremendous importance. It's a program articulated in 16, 17 points. Let's see. And it's a series of commitments. It's a kind of a chart where you see 5 candidates for the Democratic nomination for mayor of New York City. And you've got these 5 candidates and how they stand on a total of 18 critical issues. So we've got the Tammany Hall sort of machine candidate Quinn and a bunch of others, right, that are probably not well known outside of the city, and Randy Credico. We talked about Randy Credico last week, and now we're going to try to go a little bit more in depth. Now, the thing that I appreciate most about this, as you know, the overwhelming importance of program. Without program, there is nothing. There is no identity. Nobody knows who you are. Nobody knows what you want. Nobody cares about you unless you care enough to have a program that somehow addresses something important to them. So here we have, as I say, 19 critical points. And we've got things like create jobs, have New York City start its own WPA, PWA job program, expand rent control and stop all foreclosures on residences, jail the felons at Goldman Sachs, J.P. Morgan, Hong Kong Shanghai Banking Corporation, and so forth, protect small businesses, raise the New York City minimum wage from $7.50 to $12.50. And as I said last week, I think that's been overtaken by a $15 consensus, but there's a big step in the right direction. Free health care for the people of the city of New York. Go back to what we had really well into the 60s and into the 70s, that if you could qualify for it, you could get a free college education at CCNY, right? College of the City of New York, Queens College, Brooklyn College, and so forth. Those were all free. Why can't we have them? What is about the era of globalization? Globalization is so great. How come we can't have the things that we were able to have? Make the bus and the subways free. And then when we get to the bottom of this, we're going to talk to Randy here in just a minute. At the bottom of it, the thing that I think is the absolute key to it, how do you pay for all this? Because that's the inevitable question. The answer is a 0.5% tax on Wall Street. The biggest river of money in the world so far, not taxed at all, right? Similar to the French nobility, or also clergy, I'm afraid, under the Ancien Régime before 1789. They didn't pay any taxes. No taxes on nobles, no taxes on the clergy. Bourgeoisie paid, and the peasantry, of course, paid through the nose. So I understand now that we've got Randy Credico with us. Am I correct?
Yes, sir.
Randy, welcome. Thank you. I was just going through some of the program points.
Wait a second. Before you do, I got to say something. I was just about to bring up what took place in France prior to July, or the meeting of the Third Estate, the meeting of the General Estates in April of 1789, and the imposition of the tax on the churches, the civil constitution, and the bourgeoisie. They paid. I mean, the bourgeoisie paid taxes, but the nobles didn't. And so I was just going to bring that up, and you took the words right out of my mouth. So go ahead, start from there.
I'm just admiring this. This is a striking pamphlet. It's got King Kong on the front of it, but it's got these 19 program points. And the substance of our program, as you know, I think, because you listen to it sometimes, is this idea of program, that the essence of struggle, the essence of progress is program, right? As Frederick Douglass says, power conceives nothing without a demand. So We're delighted to have you. I think you got many, many points. I think within the 19 or so that you've got on the pamphlet that I have, we could probably focus especially the economic ones, because here people in other parts of
the world... That's an abridged version, by the way, of my full program.
you start where you want to, and first of all, tell us a little bit about yourself, where you come from, what you're running for, when is the election, and then we'll get into things like also how people can help you, contribute, volunteer, sign the petitions, and so forth. So please, take it away.
Okay, first of all, I am, for many years, a political satirist and a civil rights activist. I started out in Las Vegas, actually, in the mid-'70s. I was, a voice impressionist influenced by David Fry. And I got very political in the mid-'70s when I ran across a political satirist by the name of Mort Saul, and he got me to move in a different direction. And in the '80s, I do great impressions. I do great like Ronald Reagan. I was doing Nixon back when I first started, and Hubert H. Humphrey. When there's no difference between the parties back then nor now, as you know. Hubert Humphrey was a conservative Democrat. So at any rate, I was a political satirist,
impressionist. People don't remember Humphrey. That's a great impression.
Is it? You like that, right?
Yeah.
And,
I believe. What I remember with Humphrey is he always say, I believe.
I believe, and I concede is what he said more than anything else. He had one great speech at the 48 convention for Harry Truman about civil rights. That's when he stomped him and walked out the door with all those other Southern Democrats, you recall. So you're a historian, and it's very difficult to get one past you because I listen to your show, and it amazes me the breadth of your historical knowledge on just about any period of time in human history. So, so I got involved in the '80s against the war in Nicaragua. The Contras. I was down there. Had an organization called Humorists Against War. The whole situation down there in Salvador, Guatemala. Pat Robertson's supporter Rio Smart. You might remember that. And I went against Reagan. I went on the Tonight Show in '84, and I was talking about Jane Kirkpatrick. I was doing really well. And I said, you look at Jane Kirkpatrick, middle of my act, by the way. I said, you look at her and analyze some of the things she says. You have to ask yourself seriously, did Eva Braun die in that bunker in 1945? Well, of course, that didn't go over well, and that's way before cable. And, you had millions of people watching it, and I was bounced from the show and never got invited back, like the good Professor Irwin Corey. So that evolved. And then in the late 90s, I got involved running an organization called the William Moses Kunstler Fund for Racial Justice.
Hang on, Randy. The music, we have these hard breaks. It's all built around these hard breaks. As soon as we hear the music, we'll be back in 2 or 3 minutes, and I'm hoping you can stay at least 2 more of these segments. In a minute. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. We're having a great time here talking with Randy Credico, who is a candidate for the Democratic nomination for mayor of the city of New York in a primary that I believe is going to be held in September. Am I right?
Yeah, September 10th. I'm also running, I will be on that ballot. I know I read that you had been running for Senate. What year was it, 76, when you ran for Senate?
It was 86. Actually, if you get a copy of the New York State Code,
yes, and you got tossed off.
The Rubenstein-Oliver case is a landmark in New York State electoral law.
How did they throw you off? But, in a nutshell, you got tossed off. They said that your petitions, they found a way to challenge your petitions. Is that it?
It was called the Pecoraro formalism. In other words, every 4 years, the machine introduces some little technical thing that you have to know about. And if you're just going by, the last 20 years, that won't be good enough. And this led to lots of people being thrown off. Ed Koch, the mayor then, had a meeting. He invited all candidates who had been thrown off the ballot were invited down to City Hall to complain about it. Well, that was all he could offer. But therefore, you have to watch out for that. So right now, though, we're in the phase of gathering signatures
right now, and I got to tell you,
tell us about that and how people can help.
This time I will be bulletproof because I've got 6 candidates up in the Bronx running for city council and for an assembly seat in a special election who've put me on their joint petition, and it requires. And I have I have people in all the projects in New York City. I'm really spread out with a great crew of people that believe, and we're going to go in with 5 times the necessary minimum. Now, I ran against Chuck Schumer in 2010 for Senate in the Democratic primary. Well, I didn't get there because Schumer spent millions of dollars to make sure I didn't get on the ballot once I turned my petitions in, and plus he infiltrated my campaign with, and I write about it in the Huffington Post, 5,000-piece screed, where he had infiltrated my campaign with a couple of people that were running for other offices, and we put a joint petition together, and then they turned in blank petitions. And so I got screwed there. And it was the same issue then. It was about taxing Wall Street. And, Schumer is the one responsible for repealing Glass-Steagall. He, back in 1999, his first month in office, he and what's his name from Texas, Phil Graham, they collaborated. And then the President Clinton signed it. And then, Robert Rubin left and made millions and billions of dollars. You know how the whole thing works. So that was the focus of my campaign in 2010, right after the meltdown on Wall Street. And Schumer didn't want that to come up in the primary. So he spent millions of dollars to make sure I was knocked off the ballot. Now,
Randy, if people want to come forward now and help you, suppose they want to contribute, suppose they want to volunteer, give us all the ways they can get in touch with you.
The ways you can do it is but the most important is for me to talk about, and the 0.5%, I really agree with your platform, 1%. 1%, I think, is the real number, and the 0.5% is there. It should be 1% because they can raise $100 billion.
Well, Randy, just since
Credico2013.org. Credico, Credico, 2013.org. Or they can email me, credico2013@gmail.com. That's how they can reach me if they'd like to participate in the process.
And do you have an address for contributions?
Yes, it's on the website. You want me to give you the hard number? Is 42 High Street, Huntington, New York, 11743. It's called Friends of Randy Credico. 42 High Street, Huntington, New York, 11743.
Okay, we'll get ready to repeat that at the end now. But concerning the 1%, 0.5%, you got to remember the 1% is the federal law, and the way we've proposed it at the United Front Against Austerity is that of that 1%, half would go to the federal government, half would be distributed to the many states through revenue sharing, and then, of course, through the states, that money would, to large degree, find itself going on to municipalities, cities, things like the Port Authority, right? There are all kinds of recipients at the end. So you are absolutely in line with the 1% as the national policy. You're simply saying that New York City has been so depleted that it needs to step forward and take the lead and get the 0.5 of 1%. And of course, the answer that they'll give to that is they're going to go to New Jersey.
Well,
so
I have an answer to that.
We've got a candidate in New Jersey who's also running for the Wall Street sales tax.
Well, my answer is what you just proposed. It's got to be a national tax, and then instead of a city tax, a national tax, and then the preponderance of it would go to the area where most of these transactions take place. It's like Alaska. Everyone in Alaska gets $500 a month, I believe, from oil revenue because that's where the companies suck up all the oil and they sell it elsewhere. So this state, and this city would get a huge amount because this is where the money is actually transacted. But that it should be redistributed from Washington to the various localities, as you said. And you could raise, even Tom Harkin, the hack that he is, has a mild 3 cents per transaction, or 0.3 cents, which would raise $60 billion, and they won't go for that. The 1% is the real number that you propose that I subscribe to, and I will continue to speak out for that. And, of course, it makes everybody else uncomfortable at these debates. I proposed it the other day up in Harlem, and I got a standing ovation, and Mr. Weiner had to follow me. Anthony Weiner had to follow me and fell flat. He is not going to propose a nickel sales tax on Wall Street. So he's Chuck Schumer light. I mean,
this is exactly the area that
Chuck Schumer on every level. He supported the Patriot Act both times, supported the war in Iraq, and these things come up. He's uncomfortable talking about it, but he's going to have to deal with it at this point, since we are in the surveillance state under Obama right now, and he was part of the precursor to that with Bush, with the Patriot Act.
But now, concerning the reactions that you're getting, I know what our listeners are interested in to a large extent is when you bring up the 0.5% in New York City, can you tell us about the different audiences, the different people that you've talked about with this, and how they respond, and what the arguments are? Do they have some argument? They say, well, that's wrong because X, Y, Z.
Right. Well, you pointed it out. They always say they're going to blow town, right? Well, where are they going to go? They're going to go to Jersey. They're going to go to Trenton. They're not going anywhere. And if they were to go, and with what you're proposing, which is a national tax, they can't escape it. And the European Union, they are imposing a tax just like that, I believe. And so you can't find haven in Holland or safe haven in France. If it's national, it's national, or across the continent there. And I'm proposing the same thing. I think it has to be in federal code, so they can't move to New Jersey. And that's the only response I get that's negative. Most people love it. No one pays. It's like you were saying earlier. They weren't paying taxes in France. No, there's plenty of money here. There's plenty of money here. It's being concentrated. Wall Street, bankers, Goldman Sachs, Chase, Bank of America, they've all got tons of money, and it's here. The city's broke, the country's broke, the same way France was broke after they financed the war here. Ben Franklin got all of those loans. They couldn't pay back the loans at that time, and so when they brought in Necker, King Louis XVI, to try to straighten things out, and they couldn't do it, they had to come up with a tax.
Okay, hang on 1 second. We're going to have one more segment with Randy Credico, Democratic candidate for mayor of the city of New York. We urge you to think about voting for him in the primary in September. Back in a minute. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. We're having a very interesting talk with Randy Credico. Randy Credico is candidate for the Democratic Party nomination, mayor of the city of New York. He is currently in the phase of gathering signatures on petitions to get on the ballot, and in hyper-technical New York State, as I can assure you from sad experience, they throw you off the ballot anytime they can. Randy, what I'm thinking of right now is the last cycle in New York City. We had the mayoral debate with a guy who came forward and said the rent is too damn high, and that rent is too damn high went around the world. That became viral. Now, you're going to be in debates, am I right? I see on your...
Yes, I plan to be in debates, and the rent is too damn high guy, incidentally, was the same guy who Schumer had infiltrate my campaign. So it was a nice slogan. He doesn't really have a program, and slogans are very good. It was a very catchy one. Mine's going to be Tax Wall Street, and I will have
There we go. That's exactly it. That's what I'm hoping for. In other words, what I was trying to say is we want to get you to do the same thing against Wall Street that this guy did. In other words, go viral, go worldwide and viral with the Wall Street.
I'm going to be on the ballot in the fall as well because I'm going to have a independent body. I just won a major federal lawsuit from 2010, which you can get online right now, a major lawsuit against the Board of Elections. We won in our favor. I am going to be run on an independent body, which is really going to revolve around taxing Wall Street. So that no matter what, they're not going to keep me off. That's going to resonate. People love it. It's a great message. You know, when they listen to your show, I tell everyone to listen to your show. I become an acolyte of Webster Tarpley, and it's been very educational for me, and I consider you one of my, when you're not working, unofficial advisors.
Well, thank you very much. That's an honor. So I hope you're going to keep us informed when those debates are. But just very briefly now, for people outside of the city, because I also can't keep in touch with this stuff. You have this Anthony Weiner, right, the exhibitionist. He's running.
Right.
Tell us about these others. Quinn. Who is Quinn?
Quinn gets money from real estate interests, which is really what it's all about here. The game in New York City is real estate. If you take a look from the Empire State Building down, how much real estate is here. And so they control it. They don't pay many of the big moguls here, like the Yankees or the Barclays Center or the Dolan family. They don't pay taxes. They get this little loophole called 421A, and that is if they promise to build low-cost housing, then they don't pay taxes. And so they're the nobles. They're the nobles who do not pay taxes. There are people who claim they're going to build, and they never do. And then there's eminent domain that's through a process that is very corrupt in the state and local level. And so there's no taxes. We need to have a progressive real estate tax in this city as well. And taxing what's called non-tangible assets, which are stocks and bonds and securities, right? We're for that as well. And derivatives, of course. CDOs, which you've really hit me. You really hit me to CDOs, and I love the position of the Federal Reserve paying for free tuition. And I'm for free tuition in this city. Now, Anthony Weiner, he's the one who supported the TARP bailout in 2009 under Bush, and then once again under Obama. He supported all of that. Christine Quinn, she's controlled by the Dolan family here, not the Dolan family, but the Rudin family. She even allowed a hospital in her own district to close down because the Rudin family wanted to turn it into a condo unit, and a huge condo project. And so St. Vincent's is closed, and there's no hospital in the West Village. Bill de Blasio gets money. He's a nice guy. But he used to work for Hillary Clinton, the campaign manager for Clinton in 2000 when she ran for Senate. So that tells you everything. The other guy's John Liu, who's the controller. He's an all right guy. He's moved to in the right direction on social issues since I jumped into the race. And there's Bill Thompson, who's black, who almost won against Bloomberg in 2009. But the problem is he's getting his money from a fellow by the name of Alphonse D'Amato and Randy Mastro, who used to be Giuliani's deputy mayor. And so when they bundle money for you, they don't do it because they're hip people and they're humanitarians. They're doing it because they're expecting something in return. And D'Amato represents a lot of evil interests, and that's why he's bundling money for Thompson. And I think and there's another guy by the name of Sal Albanese. He's a nice guy, but he's going nowhere. He doesn't have the money. But his message is move to the left, or I don't know, left or whatever, in the progressive or the right direction. I don't like to use terms anymore, left and right. And, that's about it. That's what we have running for the Democratic nomination, and I expect to be on the ballot. Someone will probably challenge me, but it will just help me out if they do challenge me, because it's going to incense a lot of people.
Well, that's excellent. What you say about hospitals, right? Closing of hospitals. This is an issue in every
of them under
big city.
Well, there's 8 hospitals in the Upper East Side of Manhattan. There's none in the West Village. Ironically, that's where she's from. Christine Quinn, she's the favorite to win, along with Weiner, is doing well in spite of the fact that I bring up when I got debate the other day up at the Schomburg Center, the fact that he supported the war in Iraq, which cost this country $1 trillion and still counting, and he using the cover of thinking they had weapons of mass destruction. Nobody thought that. They just had that as, a fallback position in case they got jammed on it. And and then the Patriot Act and the TARP bailout and this ridiculous wall on the Arizona border, which is going to cost $1 trillion, and it's going to go to, who's going to go to? Bechtel and other special companies. I think even Halliburton building this wall that's not going to stop people from coming across the border. So it's a big boondoggle project. We're paying for it. Remember, we're all paying for this right now, and let the nobles pay for it. Let Wall Street pay for it, but the average person shouldn't be paying for these foolish, what's called wars of intrigue, basically. And those are my positions. I have very solid positions. I'm not a career politician. I don't expect to win, but I'm there to try to move the debate in the right direction, make Wall Street pay. I mean, France was bankrupt, and by the time Napoleon got in, they were the strongest country on the face of the planet because they taxed the church, or they took the property away from the church with the civil constitution, and they taxed the nobles. And so France became the number one country on the planet. They weren't bankrupt. It's that there were no coffers because everyone was hoarding the money who got special treatment. And that's what's happening here. There's plenty of money here. It's just that it's being hoarded by those who've been given special treatment, while small businesses are paying up the wazoo to operate in the city. They're fining taxi drivers, if they make one bad turn, what they make in 2 days, they get fined. The bridges and tunnels are outrageous. The kind of service you get on the subway, just because you're ruled by a dictator doesn't mean that the subways and buses run on time. They're not running, or the trains run on time. They're not running on time in New York City. I would make it free. I would make it free if I were the mayor, because I would use what's the last promise there, which is to raise the taxes from Wall Street, that 1% on the national, 0.5% locally, and we could pay for all of it.
Absolutely.
People should listen to your show and really get an understanding of how the economy works, the historical precedents, whether it be I heard you talking about the Depression or the bank crisis of 1819 and 1837 and 1873 along the last couple of months. And so those are all very valid precedents on what's going on today.
Right, and it's also worth remembering that even when you have down days on Wall Street, like yesterday, with the Wall Street sales tax, whether the market goes up or down, every trade pays something. We want to thank Randy Credico, Democratic Party candidate for mayor of the city of New York, and he's going to be on the ballot one way or another, and the two contacts are credico2013.org, Credico 2013.org, and Credico2013 @gmail.com. We'll repeat these later on in the program. Thank you, Randy. Keep in touch with us.
Give me a shout-out to Daniela Walls, okay?
Okay, and we'll see you soon. Come back and report. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. This is Webster Tarpley here in Washington, D.C. So that's Randy Credico, Credico. The website is Credico2013.org. So this is the mayoralty of New York City, and always a kind of leading indicator of where things are going. And, of course, the key demand, as Randy says, is to tax Wall Street, to end this absurd situation where the biggest river of money in the United States and the world pays absolutely no taxes. We don't want to hear anything about any other tax reform or other changes unless we get that Wall Street sales tax. And that then, of course, stabilizes the federal budget, the state budgets, the local budgets, so that austerity becomes unnecessary and criminal. And we'll talk about that to the extent we have some time. Now, the thrust, therefore, at the moment is two things primarily. One is we're interested in stopping the war with Syria. We're interested in undercutting, discrediting, exposing, denouncing the various covert operations which are designed to goad a reluctant and vacillating Obama, and certainly a population here in the United States that wants no part of anybody's war in Syria. No interest, no national interest, and no public interest in doing this. 70% of the U.S. population, according to the latest poll, say don't arm those rebels. Don't give any guns or weapons to those terrorists, to those death squad characters, to those bearded crazies over there in Syria. Assad, much less of a problem for the average American than one of these Al-Qaeda type crazies from Nusra or Farouk or whatever it is. And therefore, in that context, it's time to defeat a CIA covert operation. And the one that is now within reach of being defeated is this Ed Snowden fraud. Ed Snowden this week has moved towards a kind of merger with Assange. I suppose you can imagine Snowden and Assange nervously eyeing each other to see what the implications of competition, mutual denunciation might be from the point of view of gate receipts, numbers of world dupes, right? You can imagine both of them, Assange and Snowden, with these folders saying world dupes in mega dupes, right, or things of this sort. But they've decided to combine. At least it's like the legend of superheroes, the legion of superheroes. They come together. However, what's very interesting, and I'm happy that Credico raised the name of Mort Saul, right? The legendary comedian Mort Saul, still alive, and I hope still fighting. This is somebody we could learn something from. When the Pentagon Papers came out with Ellsberg and all the rest of it, there was one prominent voice that said, I don't believe this. I don't think this is really what it claims to be. And that was Mort Saul. And remember, the Pentagon Papers were doctored. They were fake. They were heavily edited. To do what? To blame Kennedy, to blame politicians, to blame the U.S. Army, to whitewash the CIA. That's simple. And, of course, nothing in there about the Kennedy assassination. And as you can read an article that I've written about this on tarpley.net, that's gone up this week. That's exactly what we have now, right? Whistleblowers who come forward with earth-shaking revelations, and we knew it all, right? In those days, if you've been reading Agence France-Presse or Le Monde or whatever it was, you knew all that stuff. There was nothing that Ellsberg had to tell you. And similarly, today, right? You'd have to be essentially a recluse not to know that there was warrantless wiretapping and that there was Echelon and there was Operation Trailblazer and there was all this stuff back under Bush and now going on for 6, 7, 8 years. This is this guy Comey, who has now been made the head of the FBI. That was his fight. Comey and Ashcroft said we want to put a limit on the warrantless wiretapping, and that was 2004. And that came out a couple of years later, I guess, not immediately, but somewhat later. So even the left liberals are now nervous. The left liberals are hesitating. It's not a knee-jerk. It's not like there's an immediate consensus of foaming support for Snowden. This is not the case. Look at the prominent left liberal Naomi Wolf. Naomi Wolf comes out on her blog saying, I am very suspicious, deeply suspicious that this Snowden is not who he says he is. And then she follows that up with further questions. Now, the reasons that she advances are not the ones that occur to me, but they are relevant and cogent reasons. So take a look at what Naomi Wolf writes on her blog, and then you see slanderers, people coming up out of the gutter. Dave Lindorf comes up and says, is Naomi Wolf working for the National Security Agency? Well, Dave, there's only one person in this story who is documented as working for the NSA, and that's your darling Ed Snowden. There's somebody who indeed worked for the National Security Agency, right? And you know these agencies, they say you go out feet first. Once CIA, always CIA. Once NSA, always NSA. So, Dave, maybe you better go back and look at that and consider what you're doing, right? Slandering, and a woman, too, right? Slandering somebody who is simply trying to, she's trying to doubt the hegemonic hysteria of the mass media. Turn on CNN. It's Snowden vision, wall to wall. And it's gotten so extreme now that the revelations are reported as if they were fact, without mentioning Snowden. In other words, you'll say, oh, there's a report now that the U.S. was spying on the participants in the G20 4 years ago in Britain. Whose report is it? And that's not mentioned, usually on radio or things like this. So Snowden has now been merged into the establishment. And as I say, the thing that is really galling about this is the goal of this is to get the Syria war. Part of it is to push all attention for the looming war with Syria to the side, right, to create this fool's atmosphere in which all the civil libertarians they're so concerned about their own privacy that they're going to attack Obama about this, and all the while the wheels of the war, the mobilization is going along, and the war is about to begin. And if you haven't learned anything, you've got to understand that war is the guarantee of totalitarianism. Without war, these other things can be dealt with, hopefully, or there's some chance. With war, you can forget it. There'll be hysteria. There'll be false flags. There'll be Gulf of Tonkin. So that is the actual choice. So the choice we're making here is urging people, come forward now, denounce Snowden, expose him. He's a fraud. This is not real. These are old headlines. This is old news, cliches, old as the hills, nothing new. The hysterical mass media, right, the Wurlitzer, has decided to recycle all this stuff as if true, as if new, and pin it all on Obama. And this simply makes no sense. Now, God knows Obama's bad enough. But what you should be doing, if you have any brains, is attacking the main warmongers of the peace. Attack Petraeus, attack Cameron, attack Haig, attack Hollande, attack Fabius, attack General Idris, right, the new Nguyen Cao Ki out there in Syria. And as we're speaking today, on the 21st of June, tomorrow there's going to be a Friends of Syria conference, right? That's part of the series. With friends like this, you don't need enemies. And I'm urging you to go forward with this because it's possible to have this thing collapse. Nothing would be better, nothing would be healthier than to have an attempted CIA limited hangout operation collapse amid general ridicule, derision, skepticism, and rejection. That is now within reach, so go to it. Avanti, as we might say. Back in a minute. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio, the 21st of June here in Washington, D.C. So Snowden, this entire Snowden PSYOP, limited hangout PSYOP, is cracking, partially crumbling. A whole area of left liberal opinion represented by Naomi Wolf, the feminists, in other words, an important constituency, are highly skeptical. And we've got little fellows like Lindorf attacking with the neo-McCarthyism, right? Slanders. This is of course shameful, right? This is unworthy of anybody serious. So the people over at Salon magazine on the internet, obviously wanting to defend their friend Glenn Greenwald, right, their former associate, who has now moved on to the British intelligence organ, The Guardian, right, left wing of MI6, we're told, or inspired by. So Salon does something about the Ed Snowden truthers. So he's got Naomi Wolf, and then he's got yours truly. I'm always flattered by so much attention. You know me, bona fama, mala fama, semper fama, as the Romans had it, right? Good fame, bad fame, it's all fame, and we're taking it. And then, of course, other Brand X commentators. One Brand X commentator says, oh, this is a fight between the NSA and the CIA. The problem with that is that just doesn't work, right? There's no such identification in the sense that Snowden has worked for both. Snowden is the CIA and the NSA. So where does that leave you? I'm afraid this kind of contorted, tortured analysis simply reflects people who are blinded by hatred of Obama, blinded by that and also debilitated by their inability to break with this mad dog Rand Paul, this combination of killer austerity, genocidal budget cuts called libertarianism. And people who have not been able to break with that, they're left with their antipathy to Obama, and then they've got to come up with some scheme that explains it in a way, well, that doesn't involve what it obviously is. It's an attack designed to weaken Obama, soften him up, and get him to the point where he'll, if not give the order for the bombing to begin, at least let the bombing begin, as Clinton did with Al Gore back in 1999, when Al Gore ordered the bombing of Serbia as Primakov was flying over the Atlantic with a peace deal. That was Clinton too weak to cancel the order, too weak to have Gore arrested, and so forth. So that's sort of where we are now. And we have a very interesting report that John Forbes Kerry of Skull and Bones, and you'll remember that when Kerry got that job at the State Department, I think I was one of the very few who put out an analysis. Remember, this is a member of Skull and Bones, just like Bush the Younger, just like Bush the Elder, just like Harriman, just like so many other villains and wreckers and monsters in recent U.S. history. That's Kerry, and the report now is that around the 12th to the 13th of June, if memory serves, there was an attempt by Kerry to start the bombing of Syria with no plan. In other words, hip shot. Just send in a wave of bombers, get the bombing going, and then hopefully take it from there. Of course, the Syrian air defense is clever enough that they don't respond to individual Israeli aircraft raids. They don't even respond to small groups of cruise missiles. They will know well enough. When they see an all-out attack, they will light up their radars and they will begin to exact a considerable price. But they're obviously not going to illuminate their own radars and make themselves vulnerable in these pinprick attacks, right? That's one of the goals of the pinprick attacks, is to attempt to get the Syrian side and the Russian technicians to expose the assets that they have by turning on the radars and activating the systems. So perhaps Kerry was hoping that once he got a raid, a considerable raid in the air, then there would be countermeasures, some planes would be shot down, and then the thing would take on a life of its own. Now, the accounts differ about who stopped Kerry. Was it Obama who stopped Kerry from getting the bombing going, or was it realists in the Pentagon? That's also possible. Not everybody in the Pentagon is a Petraeus-style utopian. Remember, Petraeus has powerful enemies. He's widely hated. People that have come in contact with him call him things like brown-noser, sycophant, self-promoter, all the rest, right? He does not represent a unified officer corps. That's one of the advantages of our situation, right? In clawing his way to the top, he's made lots and lots of enemies. So there are probably people in the Pentagon who don't like what Petraeus and McChrystal and so forth are proposing. So all of this is going on. Remember then that in terms of this reference to Mort Saul came out and said, I don't believe Ellsberg. He was then counterattacked by two left liberal heroes who have had glittering careers. Noam Chomsky said, oh, no, Ellsberg is the real thing. I'll certify it. And then the enemy of all civilization, Howard Zinn, the exponent of Rousseau, the guy who wants to take humanity back essentially to the hunting and gathering, the Paleolithic phase. That's Howard Zinn. The two of them, Noam Chomsky, Howard Zinn, built their careers on being the yes men for the intelligence community in approving of Ellsberg. So honor to Mort Saul, and perhaps we can see today, right, the presence of me. Wolf is kind of reminiscent of the somewhat isolated voice of Mort Saul back then. So don't let her remain isolated, right? Whatever you think of her, whatever you think about her other writings or history, that doesn't matter. Gold is where you find it. And right now, it's important for that voice and other voices who are highly skeptical of Stone to be joined, right? To be supported with, obviously, critical support. That there are other reasons that are more convincing to many, at least, than the ones she cites, but that also then ought to be cited. Now, concerning the issue, then, what all this is supposed to lead to, the attack on Syria. Here we have the Washington Post of today, Friday, the 21st of June. Headline story: on Syria claims, criticism for the United States. Authenticity of chemical data at issue. Arms experts and envoys allege lack of transparency. And thank goodness, this is many voices in the international community saying that the so-called proof advanced by Mad Dog Kerry about the Syrian chemical weapons and Hollande and Haig and Cameron is baloney. There is no proof. There is no proof of chemical weapons. And we'll be back in a minute. All right, so the Washington Post of today, Friday, 21st of June, 2013, essentially reflects tremendous skepticism, rejection in the international community of this bill of goods from Obama and Kerry and so forth about the chemical weapons use by the Syrian regime. And perhaps the most important part of this is, there are a number, but the chain of custody. In other words, they come and give you this material, right? Here are samples of all different things that show that chemical weapons were used. Yeah, but where does this come from? Where does it come from? And here's I think the valid opinion. We have a certain Jean-Pascal Zanders. It's Zanders with a Z. He was formerly a research fellow at the European Union Institute for Security Studies, and he has looked at all the photographs, videos, news reports on the use of sarin nerve gas in Syria, especially those put up by the rebels accusing the regime, and he is now a skeptic. And the way he proceeded was to look at the actual well-established clinical symptoms of if you're gassed by nerve gas. That is to say, sarin gas leads to death rather quickly with blue lips and fingertips caused by suffocation and a pink hue in the complexion brought on by excessive sweating and high blood pressure. And he says, no press reports from Syria refer to those descriptions, which is one of the reasons I am skeptical about those reports. And he says that the U.S., British, and French evidence is that it cannot be tested by independent scientists. There's also this chain of custody issue. We don't have the barest information. There's not even a fact sheet documenting the samples. This is an immensely political process. There is no way of challenging the findings. So he also goes on to say, this is now a senior U.S. official, there are so many people who would like us to believe that the regime of Assad used chemical weapons. You have to question whether any of those advocates were involved in collecting the evidence. Yes, exactly. It's likely to be a big fraud. The other interesting thing here is that Erdogan of Turkey is in trouble, and he knows it now. He could be Mubaraked at just about any point. All it would take would be a decision by the military, right? The generals that he has trampled on, that huge Turkish army, second largest in NATO, second only to the U.S., right? Formidable big military establishment. Erdogan has made his career trampling all over them, right, with good and bad reasons for doing that. If they decide that he's out, then things begin to look very, very different. So the idea now is that Erdogan has been boxed in. Erdogan is not capable of the aggression and provocations that he was planning in his nighttime conversations when Obama was whispering and cooing in his ear about his future greatness. They were planning all of these megalomaniac operations. Now looks like not so likely. So that he is afraid of inflaming the mass movement in the streets if he goes ahead and makes an attack on Syria. So in some ways, Erdogan has been paralyzed. There are some who say that he might just try a flight forward and attempt to go forward with an attack in order to perhaps try to get out of his troubles that way. But it's not so likely. And of course, remember that the Obama policy is precisely leading from behind. This interesting article says that Turkey is now also going to try to lead from behind. They want to lead from behind too. This is an official. Let's see. This is a Turkish expert at the Washington Institute for Near East Policy. On Syria, he says Turkey and the United States will compete in leading from behind, cautiously inching forward in involvement while allowing other countries to go further in their commitments to the rebels. So whoever takes the first step is likely to be the dupe and the loser. So maybe that will be the hysterical French and British, but hopefully some other skepticism and self-preservation will prevail there. Remember, discretion is the better part of valor, you people in London and in Paris. Don't do it. It's going to be very, very bad for whoever does it. So the other thing then is the siege of Aleppo. This is going on, right? The same edition of the New York, of the Washington Post here, has a picture of a young woman from the Popular Protection Units, and she doesn't. This is a propaganda photo, right? This is staged. It shows a young woman with no headscarf, right? She's got long hair, and it's all visible, and she's got a Kalashnikov, and she's about to shoot it. This is obviously a propaganda picture saying, look at these wonderful, the women's brigade of the Idris army. Aren't they great? Look how westernized they are. They're not wearing chadors or burqas or najabs or any of this other stuff. And it's all baloney. So tomorrow, Idris will make his plea. And he is losing, right? He's basically driven back on Aleppo. And now he is in the coils of a siege of Aleppo, and that is where the Assad forces are going, and that is where certain Hezbollah units seem to be going, and that is where perhaps even some Iranian Revolutionary Guards are going. So that is the situation. So this is all on the razor's edge, and I appeal to people, put aside your petty concern with somebody listening to your phone calls. Half the people who are concerned about this never do anything to attract any attention. Right? Their main concern in life is to keep a low profile, and in that they succeed pretty well. You cannot go through life taking counsel of your fears. You cannot let everything depend on not being caught in this dragnet. Indeed, there's a school of opinion that says if you haven't attracted the attention of an oppressive power like this one, then you should really search your own conscience and ask whether you've been doing enough, right? Maybe you've been too lazy, right? Maybe you're victim of ignavia. Ignavia is the sin punished in the vestibule of Dante's Inferno. The core group are the angels who were not on the side of Christ. They were not on the side of the devil, but they were for themselves. They were the third force in the battle in heaven, right? When Lucifer Satan was kicked out, and all the other devils, and around them are the people who didn't follow any cause in their lives, and their punishment for all eternity is that they are forced to follow a banner, and that's all it is. It's just a banner, and they've got to run after it for all eternity because they refuse to follow any banner in their lives, good, bad, or indifferent. That is what they have to do then as their eternal punishment. So again, right now, the stars are aligned in an interesting way left liberal opinion is uncertain. And the thing to do is to make clear the more you indulge in your love affair with Ed Snowden, and with Assange for that matter, since they've now merged, the more you are increasing the possibility of a catastrophic general war in the Middle East with plenty of opportunity to turn into a world war. So we're going to be back in just a minute. We hope to get a report from the anti-austerity front in Michigan. We'll be back. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. We're down to our last segment, but we do want to go to Benton Harbor, Michigan, and get a report on the latest activities of the austerity dictatorship in Michigan, in Detroit, Benton Harbor, Flint, Pontiac, Ecorse, and other cities. In this past week, we've had, or in the past week or two, the city of Detroit defaulted, right? Practically, the bonds have gone down to junk. It really would be high time to declare bankruptcy and get protection in the federal courts from creditors. You could stop paying a lot of this debt service. But we want to hear from Reverend Edward Pinkney in Benton Harbor to get a report on what's been happening in Michigan and also what he's got planned for the coming months. So, Reverend Pinkney, welcome.
Hey, Webster, it's a pleasure and an honor to be on your show once again.
Thank you.
I tell you, I truly, truly enjoy myself when I come on your show, and believe me, it's a blessing.
Great. So go ahead. Tell us what's happening. Right, we got this Kevin
Ory,
Kevin the enforcer. Kevin the overseer. What is he doing?
Well, he's doing some very devastating things right now. He's trying to auction off all the artwork from the art museum there, and number two, he's trying to send it to the billionaires. See, they want that art collection, and you probably pay 10 cents on the dollar just to get it. So it's pretty interesting on that end. Also, which is even more important, we have discovered that Detroit, like you said, Detroit have defaulted on their loans, and once again, those who did not secure their loan will be hit the hardest. So it's really a madman. But here in the city of Benton Harbor, Michigan, we have the pleasure of a hostile takeover of all the parks in the city of Benton Harbor. We got 5 parks that's surrounded by water. And those 5 parks is the 5 parks that they want. They want those parks so they can continue to build these condominiums and everything else that they've been trying to do all this time. But how can you build a condominium on a park? That's the question. Well, according to them, they can do whatever they want. If it's in the contract, they can do it.
Wow. But we're talking about this very attractive and beautiful, the lakeside, looking out over Lake Michigan, right? You're looking, west over this huge Great Lake, Lake Michigan, and a beautiful sand and related stuff, and they want to take this and use it for the rich friends of Governor Snyder.
Oh, absolutely, no question about that. They want this from property. Like I said, it's actually 4.5 parks that's surrounded by water that they want even more. One of them is like an island. And they said, now these are their words, that they will not build any condominium or houses on the park. But they also said they would not build any on our beaches either. And now we have about $7 million homes on our beach. But we're fighting. Well, we are not giving up, Webster. We have continued this fight. Matter of fact, on last Tuesday, we protested right in front of the city hall, and it got plenty of news coverage because people understood the importance of standing up fighting, especially with that NSA that people have been talking about.
Right. So tell us now. You've got other things planned, though. You've got I think a fundraising dinner in October with Danny Glover. Tell us your entire schedule.
We have a fundraising dinner with Danny Glover October the 5th here in the city of Benton Harbor. We're trying to raise funds to continue this fight. So those of you who are out there who want to donate, whatever you like to do, or you want to come to the dinner, you're welcome. You can mail a donation to Banco. That's BANCO, 1940 Union Avenue, Benton Harbor, Michigan, 49022. That's Banco, BANCO, 1940 Union Avenue, Benton Harbor, Michigan, 49022, or you can call me at 269-925-0001. We're trying to raise funds to continue this battle, and that's what we're doing, Webster. We are right on top of it.
That's tremendous, and we'll also redouble our efforts. We've got to focus international attention on this, right? The foreign press, right? The people in Europe, for example, who are always, worried about signs of what can we say, totalitarianism creeping into various places. Well, it's more than creeping in Michigan. You've got this governor Snyder and essentially little dictators being sent into all the major cities, and as you say, law suspended. The difference between executive and legislative is out the window. Complete anarchy, in other words.
Absolutely. And you know what? And here's the bad part. A lot of people around the country figure it's just happening in Michigan. It won't happen in their town. It won't happen in their city. It won't happen in their state. But they're absolutely wrong. It's coming to your city, your state, your town next. And this is what they're trying to do. They're trying to hijack every single city government or state government that they can, and the state is behind it.
Yes, and that's, I think, Stockton, California, Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, where the city is being destroyed by sinkholes, and many others.
Trenton, New Jersey.
Great. So we've got to keep up with all of these, and we thank you for helping us to do it. What does Danny Glover say?
Well, he's excited. He wants to come here and figure out how we allow this to happen and what he can do to help us. He's in Hollywood, and even the people in Hollywood are actually talking about the city of Benton Harbor. They know that the city, the residents here, you're talking about 70% of the people that live in Benton Harbor are unemployed. You're talking about 90% living below the poverty level. We actually really do need help. But the thing is, we don't have the resources to fight back. And that's what we're trying to build up right now.
When I saw that news report about Snyder and Kevin Orr wanting to take the paintings from the Detroit Institute of Art, I thought immediately of the Nazis, right? When the Nazis took over France and other countries in Europe, somebody like Goering, right, the leader of the Air Force, Goering would go into the art museums and he'd simply point to the ones he wanted, and they'd be loaded into boxcars and shipped off to Goering's palaces back in Germany. So it's not really that different, right? When you think of vandalism and the destruction of a cultural patrimony and heritage that took generations to create, right? And they say, no, we're gonna try to sell that all off. It's just scandalous.
And you are absolutely correct. And you're talking about the artwork. You're talking about even buildings now. What they have to do, they got guys coming in, these billionaires coming in buying a whole block at one time. And they're telling each other it's 7 billionaires that's fighting for the control of Detroit right now. And Dan Gilbert, he's the Quicken Loan guy, and also the owner of the Cleveland Cavaliers. He's leading the charge, and he actually going in trying to pick, just like you just said. He's going in picking what he wants, and he's getting whatever he say he wants. So,
hey, Bevan, do you have a list of the 7? Do you have a list of the 7 billionaires?
No, I just know. The one I really know is Don Gilbert, because he's the owner of the Cleveland Cavaliers. And by me being a sportsman, I know that. But they one of them is controlling the bridge. They got different sections. Next time we speak, I'll have the 7 billionaires' names for you.
Yeah, that would be important. We could put that we can get the world focused on 7 fat cats who want to asset strip and flay alive the people of Michigan.
Oh, absolutely. And that is tremendous, and we have to stay on top of them. But I like to see these billionaires fighting with each other.
Yes, by all means. And I hope maybe it'll be possible to make an appeal to Michael Moore and say to Michael Moore, you're supposedly so concerned about Flint. What are you doing for Flint? And why doesn't Michael Moore come to your fundraiser there with Danny Glover?
Invited him last year. He didn't even return my calls.
Okay. Well, come back and tell us how it's going in a couple of weeks then, Reverend. And more power to you. Keep fighting, and you're an inspiration to everybody. See you soon.
Thanks. God bless you now.
Fast-moving news situations like I think this weekend may turn out to be. See you next week. Welcome to this week's edition of World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley here in Washington, D.C. We've just had a shudder of panic go through the world speculative derivatives interrelated bubble system. And this also points us towards the realistic qualities, I think, of this prognosis we had a month or so ago about the coming 1935-1936. That is to say, 2014-2015 marked by large-scale mass strike upsurges. We are maintaining a kind of a dual agitational focus this week. One is we're coming up to July 1st. On July 1st, the interest rates on student loans are scheduled to double. And we are going to continue to advocate the Elizabeth Warren Tierney bill. Warren Tierney, the Bank on Students Act, cutting the interest rates on new student loans to 0.75%. We would like to open that up to make all student loans, and I mean all, including private consolidation, Perkins, Stafford, and every other kind, account window. This week, Helicopter Ben Bernanke at the center of all attention by his comments that maybe the current hot money program of the Federal Reserve will have to taper off. The tapering issue. Taper on the wall. This is what Bernanke was talking about, and that has led to some real jitters around the world, a 550-point loss over a couple of days in New York, and similar losses, 3, 4, 5, 6% in other places around the world. Let's just get right to the heart of the matter. If you have a depression, we have a world economic depression. Never forget this. This is the beginning of all reality. You don't have business as usual. You cannot implement any program except a recovery program in the midst of a depression. However, the alternatives are these. You can have an immediate deflationary crash of the kind that Andrew Mellon, Ron Paul, and other Austrians have wanted, where you liquidate everything, everything is destroyed, all financial values are destroyed, mass unemployment, and then supposedly you're going to get a recovery, but again, that's cold comfort if you died in the process, as many people would die, an entire human generation crushed, colossal amounts of wealth destroyed in such a process. Plus, all of those should be refinanceable at the new 0.75 rate to begin to stabilize this crushing debt burden. So this is going to come to a head now between now and July 1st. So maintain mobilization on that. We've gotten through the season of the commencements. Didn't exactly get what we want out of that, but all of that effort will, I think, come to fruition later in the summer, certainly by September, when people come back and confront this. They're going to be made aware of it. So the question of the Warren bill. The other thing, of course, is we've got candidates. We're going to have Randy Credico running for mayor of New York City later in the program. We've had Willie Araujo running in New Jersey, also for with Randy Credico. It's mayor of New York, and Willie Araujo, it's governor of New Jersey. But the important thing is that this is a united front on both sides of the Hudson. The Wall Street sales tax must be levied so that the Wall Street fat cats pay their their fair share. Now, the other thing is, and this is also raised, of course, in the Warren bill. The Warren bill calls for the student loans to be financed at 0.75% through the Federal Reserve. Doesn't do that if you want to. If you're a lunatic or if you're a proto-fascist, you can go with the Austrian school. Or you can do the Keynesian consumer-led recovery. This was tried by Pelosi and company in the stimulus, and it does have some positive effect. There's no doubt about it. It does keep things going for a while, but eventually the political will was sapped, and it does not produce a lasting, self-sustaining economic recovery. I'm sorry, it does not. And then we have, in some ways, one of the worst, well, it's not the worst, but it's very bad, which is the hot money approach. And the hot money approach is the $27 trillion line of credit, and then the QE1, QE2, QE3, $85 billion of hot money a month. And all that does is to stoke speculation, because it's not channeled into production, infrastructure, and the things that will lead to a productive recovery and full employment. It only goes towards speculative activity, or in this case, keeping the zombie banks alive. Somehow it's a kind of a life support system for the zombie banks. So what Helicopter Ben talked about this week was tapering off the hot money. And what you see is not even ending the hot money, but even the perspective that the hot money might end someday leads to a big frisson of panic all around the world. And that you see that on the U.S. side, right? It simply means that the entire derivatives universe has been oriented towards essentially free money where they pay you if you calculate in the rate of inflation. And then we've got other things that complicate it. In Japan, we've got the Abe government, Abenomics. Abenomics, simply the old British game, competitive devaluations, right? Print a lot of yen, go for competitive devaluations, try to drive down the value of your currency, and maybe you can get an export-led recovery. That would have been fine 20, 30 years ago. The Japanese economy still maintains a very considerable industrial capability, but the problem is that the Japanese banking system and so forth, their real estate bubble has left the Japanese banks as zombie banks, and it's not possible to use this competitive devaluation thing in an economy so highly financialized, because when you're devaluing the yen, then you're devaluating all these speculative values. So that's Japan. And then China, in a process which I think will have to be investigated a little bit more closely. We've got a liquidity crunch in China.